But it turns out he had a very strong Kabbalistic side as well, and we're going to learn about that today.
Okay. So we are the 16th century, and this is right during the time of the expulsion. Just give a little bit of history to understand who this person is, then to understand a little bit what he taught. So Rabbi Yosef Karo, who's known also in Jewish lore as the Machaber, the author, which is a very distinguished phrase to call somebody because he's the author. The author means that he wrote the Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch. So he was a very serious, one of the greatest Jewish halachic lawgivers, law scribes. He canonized a lot of law, and he wrote the definitive Code of Jewish Law. Yosef Karo has a very interesting life. He begins his life in Castile, in Spain. So, if you're familiar a little bit with Spain, the Jews migrated to 3 different locations. There were 3 major centers of Judaism in different eras. There's the period of the 9th, 10th, 11th, up until the 1200s, which is in Andalus. That was the real major area of Torah scholarship. All the great scholars lived there, all the great poets, Ibn Gabriel, the Rambam, the Rimigosh, some of the very famous Ibn Ezra, some of the famous scholars lived in that area. Then, after there was the Mamluks, there was some very religious, fanatical group of Arab tribal people that took over that part of the country, and the Jews moved to Aragon. And that's when you have the second very big Jewish renaissance of Jewish scholarship is the Ramban, Rabbi Yoina, the Rashba, the Ritva. I don't know if these names are familiar to you, but these were some of the great scholars. And also Kabbalistic scholars. That's when you find the first writings of Kabbalah at that time period. This is around Gerona, Barcelona, at that time period. And then in 1390, in the 1390s, there was a tremendous, there was terrible pogroms in Spain. Many Jews were killed. It was a popular uprising. It wasn't a governmental uprising. It was a popular uprising, and Jews moved to Castile. Castile is today where Toledo, or Madrid. Madrid didn't exist at that time, but it is around that area. So Cairo is born in 1488. So 1488 is literally 4 years before the expulsion of Spain. So he has no memory of what's counts memory. He's a little child when it was 1492, and his family leaves Spain. And they end up in Turkey, in the Ottoman Empire, in Kushta, which is Constantinople, which is had a very prominent Jewish community at that time. The Ottoman Empire thought that the Spanish were fools for kicking out the Jews, and they were very welcoming for Jews. They felt that Jews entering into the Ottoman Empire would be very helpful for their economy and to reboot a lot of things, and that's what actually happened. So he lives there, and then he moves. His father passes away, and he ends up living in Bulgaria. And he's a rabbi there, and he's known to be a great halachic decider. And we don't have any tradition of a Kabbalistic tradition at this point of his life. At some point there, he meets up with a very fascinating character called Shlomo Molchai. I don't know if you know who this person is. It's a long conversation. Maybe we'll do him another night. But Shlomo Molchai is one of the most fascinating characters in the history of in the last 1,000 years of Jews. Very, very interesting character. There was a black Jew called David Haraveni, who said he came from the tribes, from the 10 tribes, and he appeared in Europe with 6 white horses and claimed that he was a prince. He made a whole commotion, and basically he wanted the European powers to join up with his army, which seems to be fictional, but somehow it existed in some capacity, metaphorically maybe, that if they could enter into Israel and throw the Ottoman Empire out of Yerushalayim, out of Israel, then the Christians can reconquer what they lost in the Crusades, and the Jews can then resettle back in Israel. So this is like a proto-Zionist vision to resettle Israel, and he was very successful for a longer period of time. At some point, he went to the King of Portugal. It's a long story, but he ended up getting very close to the King of Portugal, and the King of Portugal had a. This is the beginning of the 1500s. So, the beginning of 1500s, the Jews are already expelled from Spain in 1492, and then a lot of Jews went to Portugal also because it was a separate country. But in 1497, the Jews were expelled also again. There was no expulsion from Jews in Portugal. There was forced conversion. So you have to stay and you have to convert into Christianity. And this is a very big trauma for Jews. And a lot of Jews, what they did was they openly converted to Christianity, and inwardly they remained as Jews. And there was one such child that was born in this type of family, and he was a super brilliant kid, very charismatic, very brilliant, and at a very young age, like in his early 20s, he was already a minister. Some say he was a father confessor to the King of Portugal. This guy's name was Diego Paris. And when, I don't know if everyone's following the story, but when David Haruveni met this person, Diego got very inspired about Judaism, and he told him that he wants to live openly as a Jew, and he circumcised himself. And Haruveni told him that if you continue doing this, it's going to be a danger for any Jews that are left in Portugal. So he left. He fled, and he went to Salonika.
Where?
To Salonika, which is Greece, and there he learned in the yeshiva of Yosef Taitzak. I don't know if these names. This is a person that's called now Shlomo Malchai.
Same year?
Yeah.
What year?
15,
15, late 1520s. Yeah, early 15, late 20s. This Shlomo Malchai is a very charismatic person. He ends up joining DovBer Haruveni. He becomes a great scholar. He has a very short career as a Jew. He only lives openly as a Jew for a few years, but in a very short time, he becomes a tremendous scholar, which is kind of fascinating. He ends up writing actually books, which again, it's a whole other conversation. But what's interesting is that he meets up with Yosef Karo. Okay, this is our hero tonight. He meets up with Yosef Karo, and Yosef Karo also learned by Taitzak, by Yosef Taitzak. Now, this is when he becomes initiated to Kabbalistic traditions, deeper Kabbalistic traditions. Where are these traditions coming from? Taitzak is Spanish. He's from the older schools of Spain, which means that he's carrying the tradition, the Spanish tradition, and he's teaching it to this group of students. Taitzak was a very big place, like a major halachic figure and a big Rosh Yeshiva, but he also has a Kabbalistic saitam, and he's teaching these groups of students. Yosef Karo becomes very close to Shlomo Malchai. He thinks of Shlomo Malchai as a very pious individual, a very holy person, and the sad ending of Shlomo Malchai is that he was killed. He was killed in Italy. He was not killed. He didn't go back to Spain, but he was eventually killed. It's a long story. I don't want to get into the story, but what's important is that
Just got a safer. You have a safer? Multiples of recently published.
yeah, both
Beautiful
are.
safer.
Yeah, there's Safe on the Floor. And there are two books that he wrote. Very interesting books. They're more like visions of different visions that he has.
There's another one there's.
The Safe on the Floor and God and something. Highest content.
Has the seal on the front, so it's like a circle.
Could be they just published it now. That's bad. Oh, okay.
Torgum is like.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's that. Half of it is fake. You have to be careful with that.
Okay.
No. In other words, switching on this prohibition that he takes 10 pages and makes it into a whole thick book. Yeah, so you have to know what's his and what's the Malchus. Malchus' book is very short. It's a little tiny book. It's 20-30
Isn't
pages.
Salonica when him and your Karo are learning together? Or we're not sure where that was.
No, yeah, in Salonica. Definitely in Salonica. They become friends. When Shlomo Malcha is killed, it was a very tragic event in Jewish history because a lot of people felt that it was a messianic time and that it was picking up traction. A lot of especially Jews that were from the expulsion of Spain, like DovBer. You ever heard of DovBer? You know who this person is? DovBer was the finance minister of Fernando and Queen Isabella. He was the most powerful Jew in Spain. He eventually left Spain as a Jew.
He was there after the Inquisition started.
He left in 1492.
Oh, okay.
You can actually visit, if you go to the Alhambra, you can actually see the room where the DovBer pleaded with the king to allow the Jews to stay, and he offered the king a lot of money. And he had to leave. His granddaughter, Bevedi Abarbanel, lived then in Italy, sewed a flag for Shlomo Malcha, and you can see it today in the museum in Prague. So when Shlomo Malcha would travel or go on a horse, he would actually have a huge flag. It's like a huge red flag. Correct. And he would carry the flag. And this was a gift by the Barbanel's granddaughter, which she was a very wealthy woman.
So he was in Italy at some point before.
He met the Pope. It's a long story. I don't want to get back to Shlomo Malcha. Let's get back to Yosef Karo because he deserves his own conversation. What's very important, the only thing I want to tell you about this conversation is that he meets up with Taitzak, and he's very close to Malcha, and he's very upset when Malcha was killed. It was very devastating for him. He saw it as, of course, it was Kiddush Hashem, we're sanctifying Hashem's name, but it was a very upsetting thing to happen at that time. What is interesting is that the Yosef Taitzak speaks about, and also Malcha speak about, connecting to an angelic, a magid, an angelic force within text. Somehow you can release, there's an angel within a text. There's like a type of, we'll try to understand what this is. There's an angel within a text, and somehow if you enter into a certain type of trance state, you can have access to that angel within the text. This angelic force. This was very popular for about 200 years in Jewish history. It wasn't only this time period. It became popular in the 1500s, and it went into the 1700s, and then it just disappeared more or less. But it was a Kabbalistic practice of how to connect with a magid. A magid is like the angelic force of something. So Taitzak speaks about this. Yosef Taitzak, who's the teacher of both of them, speaks about it. The Chidor writes about that Taitzak had a magid. So it was known. And Malcha himself speaks about the type of encounters that he had with this magid. So here's the story. This is the famous story. It's kind of a famous story. This is the book that Yosef Karo wrote. This is the Kabbalistic text that he wrote. So he's a young man, and he's living in Salonika. He's married already, he has children, he's married to his second wife already. He's living in Salonika, and it's on the eve of Shavuos night. Okay, it's the eve of Shavuos night. You know what Shavuos is, right? Shavuos. Okay, so it's the eve of Shavuos night, and he's sitting together with Yosef Karo and Shlomo Alkavatz. Who's Shlomo Alkavatz? Maybe you never heard his name, but you know what he wrote, because he wrote L'Chadodi. If you're familiar with L'Chadodi, he's the author of L'Chadodi. So these are two descendants of Spanish families, and most of the great scholars at that time were descendants of Spanish scholars. So they're sitting in Salonika on the eve of Shavuos night, and Alkavatz eventually writes up a very mystical story that happened to him with Yosef Karo. This is a very, very unusual story because in Kabbalistic tradition, there's very little conversation, autobiographical conversation about people. People don't really talk about themselves, certainly about mystical experiences. The person has a mystical experience, they're not going to speak about it. I had this transcendental experience. I was sitting like this and I saw this. It's very, very unusual. I know scholars sometimes have tried to like write books of like Jewish mystical testimonies of things, and you can't find anything. It's like in the whole literature of 1,000 years, you can find maybe 10 people speaking about themselves. It's very, very unusual. So this is an unusual source. Al-Kabatz actually gives a first-hand account of what happened to him and Yosef Karo on this very interesting night, Shavuos night. And the story, and then eventually he prints this in the beginning of the book of Magid Misharim, which is mystical transmissions that Yosef Karo received from his angel. I'm just going to read you a few words. I know it's in Hebrew, but I'll try to read it in English. If I can see what's going on there.
You want a flashlight?
No, I think I'm pretty good at it. The story is like this: we're sitting on the night of Shavuos, and we decided, us two, Al-Kabatz is saying him and Yosef Karo are sitting together. It's somewhere in the years 1530, 1535, I would say, in Salonika. Or maybe Kushner. This could be actually this isn't Istanbul. Constantinople. Okay. So he's sitting together with his friend, and they decide they're not going to sleep tonight. You know, there's a custom not to sleep on the night of Shavuos. You're familiar with this custom? The root of this custom is really this. There's a Zohar, but before this was known, the story was known. It was not really practiced. This is the story that initiated this practice amongst the Jews. This is the story. So they decided to be up at night. And he says that we were studying the whole night. But it's a very interesting type of study, because what they were doing is they started reading the Torah. So these are young scholars. They're, let's say, 35 years old. Yosef Karo is considered a tremendous scholar at this time, Al-Kabatz as well. And instead of reading, like delving into complicated Talmudic law, they're actually reading the Torah. They're opening up a Chumash and they're starting to read. And since they're reading it portion after portion, from Bereshit to Vayichulu, they're just reading the Torah, like chanting. They're chanting it with Ne'ima B'Kol Gadol. They're chanting it with a beautiful, very pleasantly, but very loud. Like they're chanting it loud. So they're chanting. Then it goes that they start chanting. And Shema is the story of Exodus, and the story of giving the Torah, and the Mishpatim, and then Veschanim, and Vayikra. He's saying all the things that they chanted. And then they do the Haftarahs, they do the Haftarahs of that. Then they start saying Tillim, and then you're following. So they're going through the whole Tanakh, they're going through the whole scripture. Starting with the Torah, then they do the prophets, and then they're reading the Ksuvim, the writings, Shir Hashir, the book of Song of Songs, and Megillah Rus. And then he says, all this was done with great awe and great trepidation, singing and with a tune. So they were singing these words with trup. It doesn't say with trup, or trup or not, but they were singing it. They were like chanting it with like a type of tune, like a sing song. Then they said they started reading the Mishnah. They started reading the Mishnah Zeraim, which is the first chapter, the first part of the Mishnah. And then he says, when we were reading, then he said we read it according to Kabbalistic understanding. Then we're reading, as we're reading the Mishnah, we heard a voice. I heard a voice that was emanating from Yosef Karo. So they're sitting and chanting together. They're reading something, and all of a sudden, let's say Yosef Karo is a 35-year-old man with like let's say a pitched voice. All of a sudden, let's say a very deep voice. I don't say, but it could be the opposite. But some other voice was started to emanate from his mouth. And Kol Gadol B'Chidkos, it was actually a very loud voice and very clear. The sounds were very clear. And he says everyone that heard the voice, I don't know where the neighbors that heard the voice didn't understand what he was saying. But it was very loud. He said, we fell, and Iflino, again, I don't know who else was there, but he was there with his friend. Maybe there's someone else there in the room. He said, we fell on the ground, and in great fear. So imagine that he's reading the Mishnah with his this great scholar, Yosef Karo, all of a sudden he goes into like some type of semi-conscious state, and he starts chanting and speaking words with a very, very deep voice. Like a voice starts coming through him. And the voice starts speaking. And the voice basically says that I am, it's a long thing, but he gives us a whole long thing, but he basically says, I am the Mishnah. And he says that it's you have tremendous things that you're doing tonight and what you're doing. And then he says, go to Israel. So that's what you should do. You should go to Israel. And he does, by the way, after this night. It's a long story.
You knew the pain I was in, God says, in exile, you
Yeah.
never smiled. Right?
Yeah, it gives a whole description about the Mishnah talking about that that he's in a very state of deep exile, and you redeemed me tonight, and thank you, and you're very special. Everyone's sleeping in his bed, and you're doing something very special tonight, and he starts giving directions. And this Mishnah that started talking to, the Mishnah is? I don't know if you know what the Mishnah is. So the Mishnah is like the essential oral tradition before the Talmud. The Mishnah is like the basic structure of Jewish law before the Talmud was written. So it's about about 2,000 years ago. It was written around that time. So that's the beginning of the Mishnah, about 2,000 years ago, the Second Temple period, towards the middle of the Second Temple period. So he hears this voice, and this voice continues to speak to Yosef throughout his life. This book that we have called the Maggid Misharim is the words of the Maggid, the pure words of the Maggid, which is only a fifth of the size of the book. The book was much larger, and we don't have it. We don't have most of the text. But what we have remaining is from this. And anytime Yosef Karo would read the Mishnah, they would practice when he came to Tzfas. Eventually, he goes to Tzfas, and he's considered the greatest at that point in time. He was considered one of the greatest Talmudic scholars, halachic scholars in the world. He received smicha from Rabbi Berav. He's considered one of the great poskim, one of the great codifiers in Jewish law. But he also has a mystical bent, a mystical practice, and some of his students. Which one of the students that we spoke about last week one of the people we spoke about last week is a student. Moshe Cardavero is a student of Yosef Karo in this particular way. What they would do is, this was a practice that they would read text the way Cardavero describes in order for them to receive the Maggid. They would read text suddenly, pitoim v'lo iyun. They would read it suddenly without delving deeper, and somehow through reading this text, they would open themselves up to receiving an angelic force of the Mishnah. Okay, that's like the sketch of the story. Now we have to understand what does that mean? What are you actually talking about? Reading a text and a Mishnah starts speaking to you from a different voice. Is it him? Is it subconscious? Like what exactly is happening here? So a very simple way to think about this is that everything in this world has an angelic force, which means there is the thing in itself, and there's the quality that brought the thing into existence. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say you write something, right? So the writing of something, you put words on a piece of paper. The words on the piece of paper is the most manifest reality of what you want to say. But before you said what you put on the piece of paper, there was a certain way you thought that you want to say it. There is a thought process in your mind that's always going on before you even wrote those particular words on the paper, which is the way you feel generally. So when you read someone's words, let's say someone writes you a letter. Let's say someone writes you an email. Okay, that's more contemporary. Someone writes you an email. And you read the letter and you say, okay, this is what the person says. They want me to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, you can read that. Then you can say, I actually know this person. And I know that what they described in the words is just a manifestation, a reflection of something that's deeper that's going on. The deeper that's going on is the words that they cannot express. And then they're expressing what they cannot express in the expression of words. But deeper than the words is the thought that created the words, or the feeling that created the words. You're following this narrative? In other words, there's always the thing in itself, and then there's the thing that gives rise to the thing. If I say something, and let's say you meet someone and you say, oh, whatever you tell them a certain particular thing that you're telling them, there is what you're actually saying, the physical words that you're saying, those words, but then there's what is really being said there. Like, what are you trying to convey with those words? There's a certain feeling that you're trying to give those words, a certain communication that you're trying to give those words. Let's say even a certain frustration, whatever's going on within you is expressed in the words. So there's the force behind the expression. Okay, that's in every single expression. So essentially, any type of expression has an angelic force as that thing. This is also on a deeper level is with every single thing in this world. So the way the sages, the Medrash, the Talmud defines it is that every single blade of grass has a mazel, as an angel that hits the grass or taps the grass and it says, become grass. Now, what does that mean? That means that everything in this world is a certain manifestation of something. The manifestation of something comes because it was forced into existence from something else. The grass is becoming grass, or the tree is treeing, because there's an angelic force that says to be tree, and then that pushes the tree to become the tree. You're following this analogy? So in other words, every single thing really has, if you look at a table, certainly if it's a man-made table, right? You'll say that who created the table? Well, some physical person, let's say it's created by two people. Let's say a person actually carved the table. The carpenter, he carves this table. You look at the table, you say, okay, this person carved this table. But what does the table tell me about the creator of the table? What was the mood and the consciousness and the feelings of the person when they created that table? Now, for most people, when you see the table, you just see the table. You cannot tell from the table what was the energy of the person that created the table. But if you have a certain sensitivity and you see a piece of art, let's say, you can say, okay, this person was obviously disturbed when they created this art. Or this person was very peaceful when they created this art, right? So you're seeing the art and saying this is an expression of something that's deeper that's being expressed. There was a magid, there was an angel, there was a force that forced this painting to come out this way and forced the other painting to come out a different way, right? Or this piece of music to come out one way and this piece of music to come out the other way. If you now supersize this idea in a very macro level and say, okay, that's with the creation of man. How about the creation of God? What happened to the natural phenomena of this world? You're looking at a tree or an animal or anything in this world. What is it? So of course it's created by the creator. Okay, that's clear. But what is the particular force that says this tree should be this shape and this texture and this color and rhyme with this particular way of its existence? There has to be that there was an angelic force, right, that gave rise to that particular tree, gave rise to that particular animal, gave rise to that particular sunset.
Why is it considered angelic?
So
so many ways to describe the energy.
Energy is okay. That's very good. Let's say like this. When we say angelic, we didn't get fully understand. I'm just giving you this a few basic ideas to understand this. When we say angelic, we're saying that it's not the divine infinite life force, but it's a specific. What is an angel? I mean, it's like a very long conversation, but let's say in the most simple definition, what the angel represents, according to Maimonides or Nachmanides or the Rambam, the angels represent a conduit of a specific type of energy. It could be negative too. Could be a negative. It's a conduit of a specific type of communication, a certain type of message, a certain type of energy that's come to this world. So there's the Why they're angels is another conversation, but there's the infinite light, and the infinite light is reflected into finite existence through a medium which we call angelic or angels. So that the interface between spiritual reality and physical reality is an angel. That's the broadest definition of an angel.
That's the main conduit.
That's the anything that is called an angel. So if you're the conduit of energy, you become the angel. Yeah.
I just love listening to all of this, but just this part especially, like whenever I'm trying to explain like my and this is probably the wrong crowd to explain this to, but like if I believe in a higher power, like I'm trying to explain that, like I'm like everything is so intricate and like stunning, and like you could tell the level of like vibe or energy that was used when like creating these creatures. And yeah, it's just cool to hear like
Right. So that the particularities of life. So you'll say there's an infinite light that gives rise to existence. And in order to give rise to existence in the particular way that this thing is resonating in the one way and the other thing is resonating another way, and this color and this texture, that is the angelic force. Of course, it's carrying the energy, carrying the light of the creator, right? It doesn't have an independent existence. And if it does have free choice, that's like a whole other conversation. But that's the idea of what that means. The angel is the interface between mundane, empirical, physical reality and complete spiritual, ethereal reality. So what the interface between that, and that's why angels, this is very general, like you'll say that angels maybe have physical properties, don't have physical properties, or they have refined physical properties. That would be the conversation because it's sort of an intermediary, so to speak. So what property does it have any type of physical properties, or is it completely has no properties whatsoever? And that's a very famous debate between many scholars in terms of it's not a debate in terms of like what it is, but it's how it's experienced. It's very important because to some people, yes, exactly. In other words, it's how you experience it.
Is the angel of the blade of grass the same thing as the essence of the blade of grass, or is it different?
Well, it's the essence of the blade of grass is the divine life force. That's the definition. But the angel of the blade of grass it's weird. If you imagine this infinite, non-contextualized, undefined force needs to create a particular blade of grass. How does it go from that to that? And that interface is the angelic force. So
how it expresses.
How it's expressed as an individual says that this grass is going to be green, and this is going to be its height, and this is going to be its
how it expresses the essence.
Correct. So it's like sort of the way the light flows through that to get to that particular object.
Would we always be creating and nothing disrupting or like destroying?
What's that?
Angelic energy is always something to be created, but nothing like.
No, there is no. It
disrupting.
could. Well, we'll talk about the positive part. That's the positive is always. So again, so when you talk about angels, by the way, just you talk about angels in general. If you talk about in the Torah where it describes encounters with angels, right? Like Avram encounters an angel, speaks to an angel. So then the question is he actually really encountering something physical? Is it like, does it have a manifestation, or is it purely in his imagination or in his mind? Like, is it a meditative experience that he's experiencing?
Almost Rambam says.
Right. So the Rambam would say exactly
Never heard that. Yeah.
because the Rambam would say that doesn't have any physical properties. The Ramban would say no, it does have physical properties. You can actually experience it.
Jacob actually fought with the angel.
Jacob definitely called on himself. The question is with himself, what was that?
They hurt his leg. It seems like, can't the angel manifest in a physical way like with Avram and the angel?
Correct. No, but the Rambam would say that it's psychological.
But others might say he did wrestle with the angel
Correct,
physically. It's
correct,
possible.
Why Genesis is it about dreams and angels, then it stops cold, and the next parts of the Torah? Like you have different themes.
Of course.
Gracious, it's all about.
Okay, you really
angels.
want to talk about this? This is like totally
No.
off the topic, but yeah, yeah,
Just
It is a bit off topic, but I'm just curious.
there is an answer for that. What?
okay,
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, it's a very different type of series. Moshe doesn't experience God the same way as the patriarchs. That's the idea.
But what you're trying to get to is that the Mishnah that is speaking to Rabbi Yosef Karo is the angel of the Mishnah is the spiritual root of where
Correct.
Mishnah comes from.
Correct.
really what David showed in between.
Correct. Right, so wait a second, that's. So when we talk about the Mishnah, going back to the idea of the Mishnah, is here you have what is the Mishnah? So a Mishnah basically is teachings by individual people. Let's say Rabbi Akiva says something, Rabbi Elazar says something. They're teachings by individual people, but then there's the collective Mishnah, right? The Mishnah is a canonical text that's expressing the oral tradition of Torah. So you can look at it as individual expressions. Rabbi Akiva says this, Rabbi Elazar says this, Rabbi Shua says this. They're individual people. Then you can look at it as a collective. So when you're reading a Mishnah, okay, and you're saying the Mishnah says, like Rabbi Akiva, you heard Rabbi Akiva, right? So the great sage Rabbi Akiva says this particular thing. Now you're reading the words that he said, but there's the Rabbi Akiva, the sayer, that said it. So the person Rabbi Akiva that said this teaching is more than the teaching that he just said, right? So he said these particular words, and you're reading it 2,000 years later. So you're reading these are the words that Rabbi Akiva said, but there's also the angelic force of those words, which is Rabbi Akiva's energy, that gave rise to those particular words that said Rabbi Akiva said these words, right? Then if you go even deeper, or if you zoom out a little bit, then you'll say the entire body of the Mishnah has something to say. This entire canonical text is saying something. It's a deposit of the oral tradition of the Torah. So there's an angelic force that gave rise to the Mishnah that allowed to express itself as a particular Mishnah. So there is sort of, when we talk about a magid of something, the angelic force of something, this is unrelated to us. This is almost like a subjective truth that exists outside of our experiences, right? Rabbi Akiva said this, whether I like it or I heard it, doesn't matter. Rabbi Akiva said that. He lived, and he said these words, and he ejected his life into these particular words. So in these words, inherent within these words, is also Rabbi Akiva himself, the angel of Rabbi Akiva. I'll explain what that means in a second, but the angel of Rabbi Akiva, and then the entirety of all the Mishnah is narrated there. Now that, which is important, is that, we use the word energy, I don't know if it's the right word, but that angelic force that gave rise to those words is eternal. That doesn't disappear. So let's say, for example, today there's a person, he's walking down the street, a 95-year-old person, and this person passes on. The physical body passes on. The physical form doesn't exist any longer, but the memory or the life force of that person still exists, right? That doesn't disappear. That cannot disappear. It was always attached to a material being, but it wasn't the material being. If I say, like, who are you right now? Yeah, okay, so on some level, you're a physical being, of course, and you're a physical self, and you have a physical brain, a physical heart, and that's what allows you to function. But when you say you know somebody, you're not talking about their physical form. And when you say you know somebody, you actually know who they are, how they feel about the world, how they think about this world. That's an intangible truth about them. That intangibility is always intangible, so it doesn't die. Okay, that's important to understand that. Now, it doesn't necessarily become manifest anywhere because it doesn't have the body to manifest that idea any longer.
Accepting the teachings.
Exactly. It's 1 second. So it doesn't have a body to manifest those teachings, manifest that reality. So it doesn't show up in this world as strongly as a person that's walking around the street. When a person around the street, or maybe the grace. Okay, we're going to talk about that. So that's one thing.
Can you explain what you just?
We have to talk about it. It's a long conversation, but
No, what you just said
what I just said.
about how it doesn't show up in this world since it's not the body.
Right. When a person's talking to somebody, you say that their consciousness or their angelic, I didn't explain what that is, but your angelic reality is tied to your body, but it's not part of your body. So when the body is around physically and in a manifest form, that is still present. The moment you stop roaming the earth, the energy still exists of that person without being housed in a physical form. So how do you tap into it? Or is there a way to tap into that? Someone lived 2,000 years ago. Could I tap into that person? If we say that person had a physical form, you say, no, I can't tap into the physical form because the physical form doesn't exist anymore. But is there a way to me connect to the energy of Rabbi Akiva? Is there a possibility to do that?
Or can we create our own?
Wait a second, we're all talking about the subjective. Now we have to talk about the, that's all the objective, I'm sorry, I'm saying the word subjective. That's all the objective, that's outside of myself. Now we talk about the subjective. Because there's also my or yours, every single person is creating constantly angels. Okay, what that means is like this. There is the created reality of angels, which gives rise to things. And then every time, and then there's the life force, the angelic force that forces me to be me, like forces the tree to be the tree. But then when you live and you're conscious, you have free choice. And through our free choice, we do certain things, we say certain things, and we think certain things, right? Which means we activate our free choice to create new realities for ourselves. So we're different than a tree. A tree, let's try to break this down. The tree is always tree. That's what it's actually doing. It's always being its perfect tree at all times, which means it's constantly an expression of its angelic force that says to become tree. The human being, you are born with a certain quality that you're supposed to be expressing in this world. But sometimes, often, people say, I don't want to be that. I want to do something else. For better or for worse, but people can say, like, even though my instincts and my natural inclinations are working towards to be a certain way, I have free choice and say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something different. So when you're doing something differently, which means when you're activating your free choice, you are also creating angels. That's why it's actually a Mishnah that says that when you do a positive thing, you create an angel. You create an angel with every single word you speak, every single thought you have, and every single action you do, both positive and negative. We're not going to talk about the negative, but there's
that angel? Some expression of the deed that was done.
Of exactly. In other words, if you do a physical action, you're doing a physical activity of something, but then you're also projecting a certain type of quality into this world, which you activated through your own free choice, which means it wasn't the angel so there's sort of like the angel within you, which is an objective reality that's pushing you to be you. And then there's you that I want to be me in a different way, or maybe a better me. It doesn't not necessarily negative way.
Would you say emotions are angels?
Everything is an angel. Every single thing that we do in this world pushes out angelic forces into the universe, which means when you do a positive action, right? You physically give some things to somebody and say you're kind. You give a charitable act, you give someone charity. There's the physical act that you're doing, but then there's also something you just created, an expression, a spiritual expression. It's also psychological, it's also mental and emotional, of a connection between me and you. You give someone something, somebody, it's not just a physical action you do. You're not a machine. The person's not a machine, right? It's not like you put a quarter into a vending machine. When you have a human interaction with another person, there's something that's being created here. That's an intangible thing, right? What's the intangibility that's being created when you do something? Because you say, I gave this person charity. That's true. But could a machine also give another machine charity? Yes, if it's just an exchange of money. So you had the $10 in your pocket. Now the other person had $10 in their pocket. But that's not the way charity works. When you actually give somebody something, you're creating some type of synergy, some type of connection with this other person, right? You're encountering them. There's a dialogue, there's some conversation. That is an angelic force that you just put out into the universe. Every action you do, every word you speak, you're doing this. So I'm not only just saying something, but there's something there's like the undertone of what's being said. And the undertone that's being said is even deeper than what's being said, what's physically being said. That type of connection that's being created. And the same thing also on a more subtle level, every single thought that we have. Now, where does our subjective angel exist, or angels exist? We're using the word angels. Where does that subjective angels exist? That's sort of what the Kabbalists call your makif, your like surrounding light. I don't want to use that word aura, but it's not that, but something sort of your surrounding projection. Sometimes you meet somebody, they didn't say anything, and immediately you feel like this person is good, not good. There's something rubbing you wrong about this person. Didn't say anything, didn't tell you anything. What that means is your projection and their projection are in clash. Sometimes you come to a place and you say, I really like to sit here. This is a perfect place for me. It's not conscious. It's not really, you can't really figure this out. Like, why do I want this? But there's certain resonance. There's a certain type of energetic resonance that you feel like this location is good for me. That location is not. This person is good for me. This person is not good for me. Why? How is that created? That's created because your thoughts, your actions, your words create this cocoon of this aura market, this like surrounding light around you. That person also did the same thing throughout their life, throughout the day, and therefore you're coming into clash with the other person. It's also very relevant because sometimes you had like a negative thought in the morning or a negative word that you speak in the morning, a negative action, and then 5 hours later you're feeling very bad about yourself, or you're feeling down, and you don't understand, like, why am I feeling down? I'm in a good place. Well, because you surrounded yourself with negativity and you're still living that place of negativity, right? You created the negativity around you, and the atmosphere, the spiritual atmosphere, the metaphysical atmosphere around you is still negative, and you're living in that space. So that's your aura market, that's your surrounding light. So that is your subjective angel. Okay, so you have the objective and the subjective angels. Everything has a subjective angel. Everything has an objective angel, which gives a rise to it. And the man has the possibility to create our subjective reality. And that's the light that where we exist in. Is this pretty clear?
Yeah, but it's wild that you're saying thoughts also, because that's a whole nother.
Yeah, thoughts also.
Thoughts,
Spectrum, right?
thoughts,
Yeah.
action.
Thoughts are right.
Yeah, but it's
thoughts
projection.
are coming from all over the place. They're negative, or positive actions.
I got it. But you're creating your thoughts. Now you're living in your thoughts. You're living in the place of your thoughts. You pushed out your thoughts into your reality.
You can also like absorb them from other people.
Sure.
It doesn't mean you created that.
Sure, correct.
Rabbi,
Absolutely.
tying it all back in, because we might want to do Q&A also.
Okay, what time is it now?
It's like 8:30.
Okay, we're gonna wrap it up, and then
That's beautiful. I was coming down.
yeah,
to that point
we're gonna get to the point.
I
I mean,
mean, I want to go straight, but I missed all the people in the middle.
No, there's a lot of things to discuss. Obviously, this is a very, very big conversation.
So are these
Yes,
angels like advocates for us once
Whoa,
we
whoa,
create
one
them?
second. There's a lot of questions. Well, let's just say what the point is.
Rabbi Yosef Karo saying.
Yosef Karo. What Yosef Karo is going like this.
Angel village.
Because there's an interaction between our subjective angelic reality and the objective reality of this text. So we'll say that the Mishnah has a pure, holy, transcendent angel collectively as the entire canonical thing. We can talk about it in specific, but that's going to be not Yosef Karo does this as well. Let's talk about the very general. Which is that's the way Yosef Karo talks about, not through graves, not through individuals, but very collective. And he says that the Mishnah is speaking to him. In order for the Mishnah to speak to him, the Mishnah means what gave rise, like we said, to the tree, to the table, what gave rise to the oral tradition? What is Torah Shabbat? The oral tradition, the spirit of the oral tradition. This is a very powerful force. Because Yosef Karo, I'll say why it worked, I don't say how he did it, but because his own subjective or makif surrounding light was refined and pure, when it intermingled with the angelic force of the Mishnah itself, there was a pure transmission. So that when there was a revealing of information, which I'll explain how the information works, but when there was a revealing of information, the lens was clean because the receiver received it in a clean way. Therefore, the Mishnah says you have to live in Israel. You can't live in exile. You have to be refined in order to receive that because your antenna has to be very clean. That's part of the conversation, but we're not going to get into that. That's one thing. How he does this, and this is the technique. The technique that what Yosef Karo was doing is that they entered into like a trance state through reciting. But what they wanted to do is they didn't want the logic of the Mishnah. Right? If you want to understand the logic of it, the rationale of the Mishnah, then you dissect it. You take a Mishnah. Mishnah is a very short text. So there's two ways how to read the text. I mean, there's only really one way to really read the text. But when you think I'm reading a text, let's say you're reading 3 lines, something very profound, you want to read those 3 lines. So you sit and you delve and you sit for a few hours and you try to figure out what it actually says, why this word comes before this word, that word becomes the other word, what's the implication that like it's a law. There's a particular law in the Mishnah, so you're trying to figure out what the law is. You're using your left brain to dissect meaning and understanding from this Mishnah. But then you're only connecting to the actual words that are being expressed in the Mishnah. They wanted, and this was the technique that he learned from Tzak and Shlomo Malchut, they wanted to connect. It wasn't conscious even, you can see that it happened on its own. And then they started doing it as a practice. They were reading Mishnah. If you read clearly what they say in this anecdote of the story, it doesn't say they were sitting and dissecting the Mishnah, one Mishnah after the next, trying to figure out what exactly it means. But they were sort of like chanting it, if you wish. They were just reading it. No, well, it's not over and over again, but it's like more just reading quickly, without trying to focus from their left brain as a left brain activity to dissect it, but sort of to get into the light of the Mishnah, to absorb themselves into that space of the Mishnah. That's what they were trying to do. And when they entered into that place, because his lens was cleansed and he was in a very refined and a very high place, the Mishnah now, the subjective and the objective truths of his own reality, his own participation in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah itself intermingled, and he was able to receive from the Mishnah higher consciousness and higher awareness and even direction to his life. So that is actually what happened. Of course, there's a lot of things that are not explained, but that's the basic idea.
You're almost assuming that the Mishnah Torah Shabbat is almost prophetic in nature, like the Rebbe's father seems to say everything the oral Torah is not just a rabbi writing it, but it's because otherwise, Chumash we can read on the words themselves and value. But Mishnah Torah Shabbat we usually say does not have inherent value without understanding. So we're assuming these words are almost not Rabbi Yehuda Nasi only, but it's almost like he's channeling through him a perfect Mishnah.
So in what you're saying is correct, but I just want to say it a little bit differently, because they're not trying to connect to the specific, or at least what happened. They're not connecting to the specific expression of the Mishnah. They're saying this body, they didn't say this, but this book is a canonical text. It's an expression of Torah Shabbat. This is an expression of the oral tradition of Torah, which means it's divine spirit that's resting in this text. The words, it's not really relevant, right? That you can argue that, but they believe surely the words were, but that's not the point. They're saying beyond the words, this is the composite of the entire spiritual tradition of Jewish practice. Not in words, but it's containing something. The words are the container that's containing the specifics of that, but it's holding something that's much larger than its specific words. And by reading the Mishnah very quickly, without trying to dissect and try to make understanding of it, or to enter into that state, they were able to tap into that quality, that light that gave rise to the Mishnah.
So even though everything in the world is the last thing I'll ask guys, I know everyone has stuff you guys want to share, then everything in the world is from God, right? So you could do this with anything, but for the first 4 books of the Chumash, all 5, but especially the first 4, could you say that unlike anything else on earth, if you can get to the core of that, you're not getting an angelic force, you're getting God himself? Because
this is actually a very good question. Not exactly, but you get there is, I don't want to say like a hierarchy of things, but there's certain, like the Zohar, for example, is another classic example where famous Hasidic masters, when you would ask them a question, like Karo, some great Hasidic masters, you would ask them a question, they would say, I don't know. They would read a little Zohar and then give the answer. Nothing to do with the question. They believed that by reading this text, they were able to get to the source of the text, the light that's behind the letters, the magid of the thing, and then they'll have clarity in their own mind to give the right answer to your particular question. Should I do this business or not? Should I get married to this person or not? Should I move here or not? What does it have to do with the Zohar talking about some cosmic event? But if you're able to get to the light, that's the source of the
To clarify
information.
for everyone, his question, it's a good question.
Did they really need to do that? Like they probably had the answer? Like, they
It's,
needed the fuel, I guess.
Yeah, it's a way to get into that zone.
Yeah, right.
They did that with Chumash too, when they had a, well, something.
So that is a little bit, you're all touching on points. This, you mean you open a chumash and you see what it says, see,
Like if, like writing to Igros, you had a problem.
right, but see that, okay, so
They would
Igros is a
open the
little bit.
Chumash and they would find the
So
answer.
that is another technique that's a little bit closely related to it. That is a technique where your question is placed in a particular place. It's actually a top, the Gemara says that. You ask a child and say, tell me a verse. And based on the verse, you'll actually do something. That's different. That's you're saying it's a specific answer to my question. Here you're saying it's unrelated. Opening the Zohar is not, I'm not looking for the answer in the Zohar. I'm not saying, oh, the Zohar says yes, you should do
Said
it.
to Paul, you're tapping into a higher.
Correct. You're
intellect that
correct.
can
You're not
answer all things.
correct.
Prophecy.
Correct. You're connected to a prophetic state. Different, right? Which you randomly open the Chumash and say, should I do this or not do this? It's called a Garo. You open up the Chumash and say, okay, the word says loy. Okay, man, no, I shouldn't do it. Right?
I do both, like regular.
What?
I do that with non-Jewish texts, I should do it with actual Jewish.
Yeah. Depends if you're reading, if you're doing, some morbid existential literature, you're gonna have a lot of those.
Was this a new technique that they were doing?
No. So it's the first time that it's written down. That both Yosef Karo writes about it and Ramak writes about it. But they write about it as a tradition that they received from Tai Tzak, from Shlomo Malki. You see, at that period of time, during the 1500s, there were other people that were doing this, but it seems like it was rooted in Spanish Kabbalists. And then famously a little later on, there was the Ramchal, the Chaim Luzzatto, who also claimed to have a Maggid, and he wrote another Zohar based on that, the same idea. And that was one famous person that claimed. And the Gra, I don't know if you know the Gra, is the Gra of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, Leo of Vilna. His student writes in his Sifra Datzinis, so he says that my master was able to receive this Maggid. He was able to do this technique. He chose not to for two reasons. First of all, he said it's in exile. So the antenna is very muddied. So even if he gets a message, it's not going to be clear. And he says, second of all, he really wants to do things on his own. Like he's not interested in any type of help from any angelic forces. But after that time period, it really stopped existing as a practice. There was a guy. He's a contemporary person. He just passed away like a few years ago. He was a Kabbalist. He was kind of like I would say a little bit strange. So this book is called Maggid Misharm. He wrote a book called Mishar Maggid. He was a very big genius. He was a big scholar, and his family said that it was like a little strange. So there's two. When he passed away, some of his children let them publish the book, and some didn't, because he also wrote an halacha. He was like a serious scholar. But what the other book that he wrote and it came out, I think it's a manuscript, is he did the same thing. He believed that he had a Maggid, and he writes of his journeys. He would take a plane. He lived in Israel, and he would just use Bulgaria, for example. He would just say, okay, ticket to Bulgaria. Not because of
Not like your grandfather.
no, very different. No, that different practice. He would just go there, and because an angel spoke to him that you have to go to Bulgaria. Then he would go there, and then he would, like, some gypsy woman would tell him something, and he would write it down. Like she told me, and he saw that as an angel talking to him. And he has like this whole thing, and she told me, go to whatever. And she said, okay, I have to go to. And then,
Is this the angel speaking to Rabbi Yosef Karo? How do you think? In his mind, verbally, he's hearing it? Because it wasn't like
No,
Joseph
well,
speaking through his
they
mouth
both
every
heard
time.
it. They both
Sometimes
heard
it
it.
must have been speaking to him.
no, I think he went into some type of automated trance, and it spoke through him.
Okay. Oh, always through his mouth.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. It spoke through him.
Do we, anybody have a question wouldn't really feel like asking, but you're comfortable, so you should
Clarifying.
Yeah.
Or
You're not vibing with the person's work, or even with the venues.
Yeah.
What is the practical lesson we should take away from that?
Leave. Man, that's how it is.
What if you're like married to the person?
No, God forbid. Why- well, how would you know that? Yeah, well, you probably made a mistake to begin with. I don't know.
And leave.
First of all,
Well,
by the way,
instead of
it can
like
happen
working
throughout.
something out.
By the way, you could be married to a person for a long time, and then you can develop different types of armakif because you have certain thoughts, they have certain thoughts, you have certain feelings, they have certain, and
You
you,
drift apart.
you drift apart, of course. Then your makifim is very, very different.
What's
Makif, it's like surrounding life.
Rabbi Yosef Karo is such a fascinating. I think it's interesting also that he's buried a little bit apart. He wasn't allowed to study with Rizal, like he had his own path. Do you feel like Rizal, we know from he pushed him away from learning with him? Obviously, Rabbi Yosef Karo could handle Shulchan Aruch, and he could learn with Rizal. But was there something that everyone has their path, not only within their life, but also within Kabbalah? Like the Rizal felt if he did too much within, he would start to move away from something about his purpose. Like
There's no question. The Yosef Cairo is much more.
since he
His
would
cup-
fall asleep whenever he would.
That is actually no. That's
Oh, it's
you're
one of the
mixing up.
books, one of the storybooks of Rizal has that, but it could be. one of
No,
the
it's with
books you
Al
buy in
Shech.
stock.
It's Al Shech. It's a different story.
That's the one.
I know, but there's actually a version that it says
I need
Yosef
to
Cairo.
bring all this stuff to you and find out what I'm reading.
Yeah. It's the story with the Al Shech. Yosef Caro's Kabbalah is it's much more connected to Cardavero,
Okay.
which is very more connected to Spanish Kabbalah.
So Rizal's.
That Rizal's not. That Rizal is very much not a Spanish style Kabbalah. It's indigenous. It's original, but it's not. It's very much not so much. It's very much not in the same line of the tradition that was being given over from the Spanish Kabbalah.
The Zohar is not their source
The Zohar is the source of the whole.
for Spanish.
For
also.
Spanish also, yes. The Ramak wrote on the Zohar and I rewrote on the Zohar, but it depends how you read the Zohar. The Zohar is an open book. How do you read it? It's so complicated how to
I
read
think
the
it's
Zohar.
fascinating to note that the Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, who's like the Maimonides of Kabbalah, and Rabbi Yosef Karo, that is the most cerebral you can imagine in Judah.
Yeah.
They connected to God and prophecy in higher levels through
Correct.
cerebral approaches.
No, I
completely
think
emptying them.
I think that's actually precisely why. I think because they were hyper intellectuals. Yosef Karo was a genius beyond a genius.
Yeah.
I mean, in the whole Jewish history, he was one of the greatest geniuses that ever lived. He knew everything. I mean, the man. There's very few people that wrote like him. I mean, if you understand the level of scholarship, was phenomenal. But I think that was the reason. They knew that to have access to something that's hard, they had to go into a different dimension, and that was the practice.
But it also says that everybody wrote with prophecy until like the 1600s.
Whatever what?
Wrote with Ruach HaKodesh
But
with
it's-
prophecy.
That's something. Yeah,
Till
that's
the
still,
Shach and Taz.
that doesn't mean that. That's a totally different thing. That's divine. Ruach HaKodesh means divine intuition. Ruach HaKodesh means like I know I should be doing this, and it's always the right thing for me to do. I don't know why, but I feel this is the right thing for me to do. That's Ruach HaKodesh. It's Ruach HaKodesh is not some type of dialogue or in a conversation, and it's not. There's obviously this level of the Magid is like a subjective, subconscious level with a subconscious text, right? They're merging in a very different level. Ruach HaKodesh, generally, when we talk about Ruach HaKodesh, divine spirit, it means basically a person has very good instincts, spiritual instincts.
How can we practice this? Should we do sometimes Mishnahs and things just as like a mantra?
I think
Meditate
when
on
Rosh Hashanah comes along, I think it's excellent time, especially if you sit Rosh Hashanah for a long time in Shul, and you're sitting for like seven hours in davening. I think this is the best time to do it, because you can actually do it with the piyutim, do whatever you do, because you're sitting
Not
in
just Mishnahs, any verse.
yeah, just get into a certain zone of like repeating things and reading things. Get into a different
Get
state
the
of consciousness.
soul of the words.
The soul of what Rosh Hashanah is, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because Rosh Hashanah, you have so much liturgy to say, and a lot of it is not really relevant to say. Like what you have to say, but a lot of it is just like piyutim. This is like hymns. Some people say it, some people don't say it. It's not really relevant. So one way to do this, if you're sitting in Rosh Hashanah for a long time in Shul, it's actually a very nice way to spend your time.
Do you want to join us, right?
No, but then you have to go for 7 hours.
You come, maybe we'll, guys, a little shameless plug. This
If you're-
Friday night through Sunday, we're doing services and meals all weekend, so you should come.
Okay,
And maybe
listen.
we'll do this.
You wanted to ask
I don't do meditation. If you come to Eon, we're just gonna daven from 10 to 4.
I'm just gonna say one line for 7 hours.
Okay, fine.
Anyone else with any clarification, questions?
Oh, I remember, but if someone else has a question.
On you.
Oh, no, I was gonna ask if, the word what is it, something?
Ruach Kodesh?
Is that similar to Wolfram, like the instant, like?
It could be interchangeable, yeah. Yeah, some type of, yeah, on the highest level, yeah. It's more, it's not even like, it's more instincts, like spiritual good instincts. You see, what?
Intuition?
Yeah, like good, but sometimes people have intuition they're wrong. They have, they have intuition and they end up doing, wrong mistakes. So Ruach HaKodesh would mean like when a person has really fine-tuned, good intuition. That's always correct.
Do you have advice for people for barometer to know that they could, if they feel an instinct that they feel is holy, to know this is not just some craziness, but it's something real? Like, how could a regular person like ourselves say, I feel very strongly about this, sometimes I feel I should marry this person, I feel I should go here, and sometimes it's just craziness, but the person's feeling so strongly. Is there a barometer or some type of way they could kind of like dissect if it's right or wrong?
Yeah, there's but the real question is how much are you in control of your imagination?
Okay.
If you're a person that's has no control of your imagination or no control of your subconscious, which means when you walk down the street, just it's a crazy monologue that's going on in your head, then probably your instincts are probably just crazy stuff going on in your head. If you're a person that has control of your inner self, which means you choose the imagery that you want to think about for the next 20 minutes. When you walk down the street, you're not just impressed by every single thing that you see, but there's an inner monologue that you have control, which means you're controlling this filter. The problem with intuitions is that the time it gets to your conscious self, which says I should make this decision or that decision, there's so many levels in between that the message is so muddied that it could have been a visceral reaction not to do it. And the way it finally triggers into yourself in your consciousness is that I have to do it. So what you're not supposed to do it is like this strong feeling ends up being the opposite. Why? Because between that intuition, that intuitive feeling that you're having, there's so many levels of your consciousness that are so unfiltered and so muddy that time it really rises to the place where you can actually say, okay, that's what it means. You're completely lost. It's the same thing with a dream. Like a person has a dream, says, I dreamt that this should happen, this is what I should be doing. Yeah, possibly. A dream could be prophetic, or it could be totally nonsense. Again, it's the question is how clear your vessel is to receive dreams, to receive messages that is consistent and real and clear, and whether it's just just strange stuff that are going on. But sometimes you have a dream. I just want to say that the Barbanel talked about the Barbanel before, which is an important character. The Barbanel writes that sometimes you have a dream and it sort of like penetrates right into your consciousness, and it's true. And how do you know? He says, because Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because
I feel like
because sometimes it happens. Sometimes it penetrates through.
it's a calm energy.
Whatever it's to you, however you're experiencing, but sometimes the person really knows, and I think that's the same thing also with intuitions about things. Sometimes intuition is like, I really should be doing this, but like, really, well, I don't know. But sometimes you're like, no, this is it, and that could be something that's penetrating through.
Is it possible that someone could be born with a stronger
Sure,
intuition
of course.
and it just grows over
Of course,
time
of course,
as they
absolutely.
go through
I think actually a lot of people are born with higher intuitions when they're younger,
Yeah.
and they lose it
Mhm.
because the society and parents, when everyone says don't follow it, don't do it.
But you get it back if you pray.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah, but I'm just saying that a lot of people lose that thing.
It's more like you just learn to listen to yourself. Yeah, that's how you get it back.
Yeah, the more we're connected with ourselves, the more we're connected with our soul.
When Moshe went up the mountain and we think he talked to God for 40 days, 40 nights, it was an angel. I don't know if it was Angel Matat or Michal, but he was speaking through this. Yeah, it's interesting.
When Moshe was standing at the burning bush, what do you think he heard?
Angel of Hashem.
His
In
own
head
voice.
Or his own voice.
That's the deeper understanding. He owned his own voice. He heard himself talking through himself.
So,
He saw Hashem talking through him. Hashem doesn't have a voice.
In his own mind or.
No. Oh, that's that would be the argument.
So our Rambam-
Right, but what we're saying is actually his voice went into like another state where he was actually having a conversation with Hashem through him.
Because there's a higher you that is far more than, you know, high.
Yeah, right. That's connected to the mind.
But Moshe's prophecy is different than other.
But that was before. You're right. Later on, it's different. By the burning bush, it was still earlier. It's correct. That is correct.
in earlier history, God reveals himself much more on an individual level to human beings, however he does it. Like hundreds, thousands of times, God is constantly revealing himself and having personal conversations with everyone.
Yeah.
And then it stops basically cold. Like at this point, there's nobody
It's not
that we,
cold. Why is it cold?
well, at this point in time, there's nobody that could say that anymore. They're speaking to God, any dialogue individually.
You always
like
speak
they
to
did.
God.
Right. But why would it, if anything, be less now when it's needed more?
No, it's not anymore. When do you, if you want to educate somebody, you have a child, when do you hold their hand?
When you need to.
When they're young.
Hmm.
Hopefully, is when they start walking, you don't have to still hold their hands.
So you're very optimistic about what.
I think the human race developed and evolved that Hashem doesn't have to hold our hands anymore and say, do this, don't do that. Okay, we got it. Now we have to walk on our own. And sometimes if you're really stumbling and you're not falling, Hashem will talk to you. How do you know what Hashem talks to? Maybe Hashem talks to you through your friend, Hashem talks to you through your cat. I don't know. Hashem's always talking to us. We have to just be awake. Well, Hashem's always talking to everybody. God is always talking to us.
Also, talking is not necessarily a communication, like,
That's what I'm saying.
they're different types.
Correct.
of
What do you-
communicating.
Talking is like looking at the wall. You can Hashem is talking to you right now. Why is the world purple? It's telling me something.
Yeah, famous saying, when people say God spoke to me, they're crazy. But when people go all day and pray and say I'm talking to God, that's normal.
But praying is not a monologue, it's a dialogue.
I talked to a non-Jewish meditation teacher recently. She said prayer is speaking to God and meditation is listening back. But prayer, davening should be both.
Prayer is
should be really
dialogue.
listening back.
Correct.
Yeah.
Prayer is dialogue. Prayer is not monologuing to something. We're not monologuing to God. Prayer is in dialogue. You say and you receive. You're always, this is what actually what you, when you pray. I mean, if you listen to the words, what you're saying, heal us. It's not a request, it's the experience of healing. We want to feel healed. We want to feel heard. We want to feel redeemed. We're not requesting that this is in the future tense. We're saying, as I'm praying now, I want to feel healed. And the way you know if you pray correctly is when you finish praying, you actually feel redeemed. You feel healed. You feel prosperous. You feel that you were heard. And if you didn't, then you didn't pray. You were just talking to the wall.
Mendel was saying when you go to the gravesite, it's also a place. If you could go to the grave of a holy person and learn the Torah at the same time and get into a deep place, you probably a good recipe for maybe connecting to that.
So this is the path. This is the path of Dari.
No, that's nice.
Doshtat is part of that, but this is the path of Dari. When you do nefesh, ruach, neshama, we can learn it one day. But that's a different thing. You're actually trying to activate the soul of that person that lives at the grave. And that's the ultimate idea why you go to a gravesite. Not is to actually be infused with the energy of the person, like an impregnation of that person, or even higher levels of connection. But that's Dari. The Yosef Karo did not do that. We don't know that Yosef Karo even went to graves. It's not like part of his practice. Neither Cardavero. It's not like a
Well,
practice.
you said last week, you said there wasn't them.
Oh, Gershon, yeah, the Cardavero, yeah, correct.
Okay.
They did, but not Yosef Karo.
When someone prays for someone to be sick, and they really pray and they really connect, and the
Yeah.
person, passed away or whatever,
Yeah.
what is the virtue of their prayer? Like how? What do you define that?
You're
prayer?
making it sound like when sick, when a person prays every single day.
Right,
pray that
so,
you're-
fine. Person prays every single day, and most times he doesn't feel necessarily he's being listened to.
Answered and listened to are two separate things.
Okay,
If you're ever in a real relationship with somebody, it's not about being answered. When someone speaks to you, they're not asking you to answer their question. They're asking that you should listen to them. We want to be heard. When we say Shema Kaleinu, hear our prayers, we don't say answer our prayers. We say we don't want to be returned empty-handed, which means we want to feel that we were heard, that our life has meaning, that we're living in the presence of something, that it's not just random that the life is just happening. The reason why people suffer in this world, and suffering comes because you feel like there's no purpose in this. This person's ill. I don't have a livelihood. I don't have a shit. Something's wrong, and you don't feel like your life is being heard. And what prayer is, davening is that experience of knowing that your life is being lived in the presence of Hashem. And that's then you feel healed. You feel whatever you have to feel that's making you feel the opposite.
You're saying angels play a big role, Rabbi, as far as life. In Judaism, we seem to not be so into intermediaries. We're very us and God, and yet many examples, the Maggid students or the Slavos, because they're talking about the different angels. There's an idea of the two angels that walk you back on Shabbat. There's an idea of what role, as Chassidim in general, do we look at as to even keep mind of angels in that respect, or even tonight you're redefining what an angel is also. So
Right.
the Heichalos meditation clearly was the whole book.
There's always the danger. Always the danger was that you're going to start worshiping this. Correct. You're going to start worshiping the intermediary as the end in itself. So there was always pushback. Every time there was a conversation about angels, there was always a pushback on the other side. For example, one of the things that you say in Slichot, I don't know if you're familiar, but you say Machnis Rachmim. You say that the ones that gather the compassion should bring our prayers to Hashem.
Kiss our prayer, make it crown.
Correct. Yeah, correct. During this same time period, like the 1600s, the Maharal, another very famous scholar, says you're not allowed to say that prayer. They took it out of the liturgy because of this reason.
Some would even say Shalom Aleichem.
Correct. Some didn't say Shalom Aleichem. A lot of big tzaddikim didn't say Shalom Aleichem. They felt like once you're already dealing with angels, you're going to start worshiping this. So it's always the delicate, very delicate. I would say the answer to this question is you really have to know yourself. You have to know yourself. Are you a person that gets stuck in intermediaries and in objects, or you could always feel like these are just access points to get
just Kabbalah study as a whole. This whole series is a huge part of Kabbalah study is to not be stuck in the outer layer of
Correct.
idea.
Correct.
But if you recognize that angels come from Hashem,
Correct.
you acknowledge
Correct.
that, then we're trouble.
Correct. Correct.
Acknowledging angels.
Correct.
You
That's
can
correct.
feel their presence if you can.
Correct.
Some
Correct.
get stuck.
But someone gets stuck in
Forget
that,
the
and they're
source.
like they're not going to the source. They say, okay, that's it. That's my experience. But if you're connected to Hashem, of course, then it's like anything. If you read the Torah, yeah, and you say, I love learning Torah. Okay, where's God? It's possible. You can say, I love the reading of the Torah itself, and I forgot about God. So if you're learning the Torah, you're saying, I'm connected to the Torah because it's God's Torah.
I have an atheist professor in college who was like teaching Talmud. No,
There you
no keep, I didn't keep anything, just love the intellect of it.
Exactly. So that is
Do you think that Hasidim also get carried away? The idea of an intermediary without, but
it could be.
Get into the spices.
No, it could, of course, it's possible. What do you mean? It depends who you are. What's the question? But if you take for example, Lubavitcher of the Rabbi, whenever they told him, you could see this, it's consistent. Whenever everyone told him, thank you for your blessings, he always said, it's not my blessings. Always, it's consistent.
Sure.
Like he said, it's not my blessings, it's God. What are you thanking me? It's not
You didn't say what, just pray to God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a tzaddik. A tzaddik says, it's not on me. I'm just a conduit. I'm making you getting connected to Hashem.
The angel is the conduit of how the essence of Hashem is expressed.
Correct.
So when Moshe was receiving like the burning bush, he was receiving it from the conduit of the angel.
Right.
But later, when he reached the
Direct. Yeah.
higher, what did he become the conduit?
Yeah. Moshe became a target.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Moshe became a
Cover
So
his
he's
face,
the he in a way
He-
Moshe is like the angelic force of the Torah.
Correct. That is exactly
Same way.
correct.
Yeah.
That is exactly correct.
What's
That's
the
a good
harm
one.
in getting so mixed stuff
Huh.
You're just getting stuck in like good vibes.
Because it cuts you off from the source of life. The source of life is the infinite potential of things. And when you're stuck with a particular form of that, then it's still not everything. And you get stuck in a particular thing. So let's say you're feeling, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're feeling a very pleasant feeling, you're feeling very much loved. Okay, it's very good. I feel very pleasant love. But then all of a sudden, I'm not feeling so much love. If I'm just stuck with that feeling of love and then I drop out of it, I feel terrible about myself. But if I'm connected to the Ein Sof, the infinite light, the one, okay, so I'm not feeling love, I'm feeling something else.
So it's like you're getting stuck in like something tangible. more
Correct.
so than-
Like, yeah, that has form. Yeah,
If your future husband has a secretary that's super brilliant, you just talk to them in the corridor every time you go to that, what's the point? Yeah, you gotta get to, that's probably bad much.
Yeah.
Is the Maggid a different type of angel?
I didn't say secretary, female, I didn't say
Is the
secretary.
Maggid a specific type of angel that's different from other angels in a specific way, or is it?
in this way, because it's not like it's not a thing.
Because it's more about speaking.
Yeah, no, it's not a thing, it's not an object. Like the angel, the creation of angels is a separate, like, we talk a lot about angels, but we didn't really, there's distinctions of what type of angels. we're talking about.
Categories.
Yeah, different categories.
Maggid's its own.
Yeah, Maggid is a form of angels.
This is getting, the Talmud will sometimes use physical and say, one angel is like half of the universe, half the world, is that just? And if you were to even witness an angel see one, you'd lose your mind, even the lowest of the angels, know these huge things. It's all symbolic, maybe.
No, it represents a state. If you would see something that's as large as in other words,
Right.
if your eyes would be
Okay.
open to see something that's much larger than you. By the way, what time is it?
It's 9:05.
Go back to the point where you spoke about, like, you know how.
So, radio?
The citizen
Yeah.
gets stuff with the rest rather, but like when you go and write a letter, they usually say, when you go to a mail, when you write a letter, they usually say, you're not praying with him, you're asking him to pray for you, which is combined with you.
Right.
To.
Right.
So that's what.
An advocate.